Hey there, listeners. This is Terry Cowley, your host of the R.M.Williams Outback podcast. Thanks so much for being here and welcome to Season 3. From her studio in regional Victoria, Becky-Jane Fortin is one of just a few milliners lovingly restoring Akubra hats. It was working with fur felt during her training in Germany and at a millinery master's workshop in France that the seed for working with Akubra was planted. In any given week, there could be up to 10 hats at various stages of repair within her studio in the northern Victorian town of Shepparton. Hello, Becky-Jane. Great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
My pleasure. Now, I've already said there are only a few Akubra repairers, but the truth is there are not a lot of milliners in Australia at all, are there?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's probably a little bit why I did travel overseas. I ended up going to Europe and landed in Germany and Berlin, and that's where I studied traditional hat making techniques there.
Is it a bit of a dying art in Australia, or has it picked up a bit since then?
I think it's picked up a little bit, and I think people are going back into wearing hats for sun protection and just a bit of a lifestyle accessory, I think, something to wear with them on their adventures.
Fashion.
Fashion, yeah.
Can you take me right back, maybe to the beginning of, I don't know if we can describe it as this, but your journey with hats? Now, I'm wondering, as a kid, did you want to wear hats? Were you drawn to hats as a young person?
No, not really. As a very young person, I was really into doing handy handcrafts with my grandparents. So I spent a lot of time, my parents were separated, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, so particularly my nan and grandma. And Nan was a knitter and did also embroidery, which she taught me, and quilling, and we always had a little craft project on the go. And then Grandma, she was more of the sewer and the doing crochet. And my mum also does a lot of crafts. So that's sort of where the passion for making things came from. The love of hats didn't come until probably when I was late teens, when I fell in love with vintage fashion and the idea of going op shopping and being able to buy something that has already been made and beautifully made that I would never be able to afford, perhaps at that time, that was still in beautiful condition and handmade and perhaps custom made. That's where that love came from.
So tell me about your early days of millinery. Obviously, that was after school.
Yep. So I was working for a tailor in Melbourne. So his name was Anton. Sadly, the shop's not around anymore, but it was a really unique store making 1920s to 40s style suiting. And at the time he was stocking men's hats. I had made some other sort of accessories and bits and pieces to sell in the store. And he said, why don't you have a go? I need someone to do some women's collection for the races. And that's sort of where it all started. I started speaking about it a lot with the customers, and I was invited to the store. It's in Melbourne. It's called the Essential Hat. And I did a day there with one of the hat makers. And she taught me a little bit about blocking and putting ribbons on and just sort of the basics to start hat making.
Before you go on, can you describe blocking?
Yeah, sure.
Blocking, because actually it's a term that we use in the boot workshop as well.
Yeah.
So tell me about blocking as it relates to hats.
So blocking is the work of making a hat into a shape, basically. So whether you're working with a felt or a straw, you either usually wet the felt and use a lot of heat and steam, and it'll be pulled over a hat block, which is a shape. It's usually made out of wood, and then it's pinned into place or pulled and pinned into place to hold the shape.
I think in the story about you that we're going to run in issue 162 of Outback magazine, I think it quotes you as saying that blocking and other parts of the process are actually really physically demanding. I think you said, I can't block all day. So you've actually really got to put some gumption behind those processes, don't you?
Yeah, 100%. You are putting muscle into it and holding sort of awkward positions whilst you're blocking with your back. And then also it's the pinning, pushing the pins in. So I have tools that I use, but it's also the force that you're using with your hands. My husband always says, wow, how strong my hands are, but it is that constantly using them. So it's that fine line of being strong with the felt, but you also need to know your limits with how, because it's very easy when it's wet, it's very easy to tear. So yeah, that's the skill that you have to master, I guess, to work with felt, is knowing when you can be rough with it and when you need to be gentle.
So you talked about sort of learning the elementary parts of hat making in Melbourne at that store. Do you remember the first hat that you actually made?
So I made quite a few in that time because I was wearing 1920s to 40s style suits. I made a lot of sort of little pillbox hats, which now I was using glue to stick flowers onto them, and one of them had a skeleton on it. And so I think about it now, and it's definitely not something that's my style, but I needed to start there to learn the techniques. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with having those quick, beautiful little cocktail hats to go with your outfit. But yeah, I developed from there, I guess.
So you're a girl from Shepparton in northern Victoria, probably a path to go over to Europe to study millinery. It's not really probably the first thing you'd think of for a girl from Shepparton, Becky. Did you feel like you were kind of defying a few stereotypes there?
100%. And I still think, wow, what possessed me to follow in this journey? And I've just kept on going because it felt right, I guess. And it was sort of the path of least resistance. When I was following that passion into millinery, things just seemed to work out.
How old were you when you did go overseas to pursue that?
So I went with my now husband, and we would have been around 27, I believe. So just under 30. And we left to go together. We'd been together for under a year, but wanted to learn a new language and try something new. But the plan was only to go for a year, but it sort of just kept getting extended.
And how long were you there for?
9 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So we really created a new life there.
And tell me about, like, how does that happen? So you move and you just start reaching out to milliners in Germany and France and other places and saying, I want to learn, I want to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So from the collection I did at Anton's, from that, I created a lookbook, and that's what I took over to Germany with me. I was very naive in that as I left, we didn't speak a word of German. On the plane, we learnt Ich bin in Berlin, which was I'm in Berlin. And yes, I pretty much with full gumption headed overseas and started knocking on doors, sending emails, and it took a little while to get people to let me in. And there were a few missteps before I finally ended up with Cornelia Plotsky. That was who I trained under. One woman was selling vintage fashion. She had this amazing collection and took me on as her employee. And the plan was that I would be helping with the collection. But it ended up I was cleaning apartments. And so I was a little bit naive.
Were you sort of looking at Europe as, I guess, the centre of millinery world at that time? Would that be a fair description?
Yeah, I think that I knew that they had this sense for tradition and traditional techniques. So they still have apprenticeships for many trades. For the centre of millinery, I would have thought it was the UK, but I really wanted to learn another language. That was another part of going overseas. And maybe that would have been an easier path to go to England. I've got family there. I speak the language, the tradition of hats for wearing for every occasion. And there's lots of similarities with Australian fashion and in England, I guess. But I did know that they really put a lot of emphasis on learning a skill and training in the old handwork techniques, and they have all of the markets people love to go shopping at. You can get everything handmade. At the time, Berlin was quite cheap to live there, and it was a really creative there was a lot of creative young people there.
So by the time you came to your end of your time in Europe, what stage were you at there, and what had you learnt? That's a big question, I know.
That's a very big question. So I had learned a lot. I had learned German, so I'm fluent in German and in business. I had learned how to make hats, and I had moved on. I had spent my time with Koi, and through that time we were doing markets at castles, selling hats to aristocrats at the Australian Embassy. So I got this huge wealth of experience working for her. And then I went on to work for a store in Berlin. It was called Victorian at Albert. I was training their staff in customer service, and I also had my own label, Fortin, which I stocked in store there. And I guess during that time, I learned that I didn't want to be doing mass production or big productions of millinery, but I had to experience that to know that that wasn't what I wanted to do. And even though they were only small runs, it was still not the path that I wanted to go down. I wanted to create hats for purpose, I guess, or have a purpose to my hats.
I said earlier that during this period that was sort of where the seeds for you ending up with Akubra these days were planted. Was that why? Because you really, yeah, as you say, you didn't want to go with that mass production. You're really attracted to the handcrafting, which is very much what Akubra does in Australia.
Yeah, 100%. So I knew that I loved working with felt because it is so durable. And I've seen firsthand that through that vintage collecting of fashion, that you can take a piece of felt hat that's 100 years old, take the bands out, reblock it, and you've got a beautiful hat again. So I think that the felt was a big part of it, and that quality that Akubra does, and what they mean to the wearers. So that's really important to me also.
The story of the hat.
The story of the hat, and that's what I am getting, the stories, which is just beautiful.
I will ask you about that in a bit more in a minute. But tell me about the recent collaboration you were involved in with the Shepparton Festival. That's mentioned in our story, and it was very much about, I guess, bringing a bit of fashion locally, bringing your expertise to showcase it locally.
That collaboration came about during a time when I took part in an art market in Shepparton last year, and through that I met Kristen, and she's the director of the Shepparton Festival. And over a coffee, we sort of thought about how we could work together, and we said, "Do you want to do a fashion show? I've never seen one in Shepparton." And so we put together a grant application and applied for the Regional Arts grant, Regional Arts Victoria, and we were successful. So that's where it all started. And the idea behind it was to have a professional show showcasing real people that live in regional Victoria, and we wanted to show the diversity of what's being created here at a really professional level, with professional photos, filming, and an event lighting, and the whole show. Because I think that is really, I really want people locally to have those experiences, to go to a show and see beautiful fashion, but also for the people to be able to show their work in a professional way.
Again, coming back to that challenging of stereotypes. I mean, this is an area that's just got so much sport, so many opportunities for that sort of thing. Possibly, I mean, there's a lot of arty people in regional areas, but sometimes they don't get quite the same kudos as the sporty people, do they?
Yeah, no, and I think the show was a really big success. We sold out. We had people calling, emailing, messaging, saying, "How do I get a ticket?" So that showed that there is a desire to partake in those sort of events, and that there is an interest in fashion and having something unique that's not from Kmart or Target, because often that's the only options that you have in regional centres, apart from the small boutiques where they might not have every size that you need. So it's hard.
So we've talked a bit about making hats, but what you do for Akubra is you repair hats because they don't actually offer that service. So you're a licensed Akubra repairer, if that's the word. Is most of your work at the moment then repairing and not making?
That's a really good question. So I have a few events coming up later in the year. I'll be taking some hats there to sell and to show. Most of the making that I'm doing is custom hats for specific purposes, but a lot of my time is spent repairing hats at the moment, which I love. I was there in my studio this morning. I had a good hour and a half without distraction, and the time just flies by as I sit there with the hat, look it over and work out what it needs from me in that moment. And that's, I do love it.
Coming back to hats having stories, let's expand on that a bit. Again, similarities with boots, we hear that a lot at R.M.Williams. The boots have moulded to their feet in the same way that a hat would mould to your head. There's that comfort, there's that familiarity. I'm imagining they bring it to you because, it might be old or it might be damaged in some way, but they really want to kind of keep the heart of the hat. Would you see that as part of your job, keeping the heart of that hat as you work with it?
Yeah, definitely. And each hat has its own story, and also the wearer. Is it the person that's been wearing it their whole life? They might just want to have the stains removed, but completely leave the shape as it is. They like that there's a hole in the front, where other people might come in and say, oh, I have to get rid of this hole straight away, or I want it to look more like it originally did. That takes a skill, I guess, to listen to people and see what they really want to get out of the hat. Do they want to display it? I had a lady recently, it was quite a small hat, and very old. It was a 54, so it wasn't going to size 54, wasn't going to be fitting any of the family, and they were going to be putting it in a box with the dog tags of the grandfather to display it. They're all very unique.
Yeah, taking into account the end use is very important. So what sorts of things would you do? Like you might replace a band? Are you steaming? What are some of the processes involved in the repair?
Yeah, so a lot of the repairs are replacing the inner band. They're just something that over time, over many years of work with sweat and dirt, they can be replaced. They'll need to just pop out and I can place a new one in there. So that requires often to take off the outer band, take out the liner if there's one inside the hat, and then with the correct size. If the hat's shrunk a little bit, I might need to stretch it a little to get the right size band to go back in. And then I hand sew the band back on, and the outer band and the liner goes back in also. So that's a really common one. Also, if dogs ever get to the hats, which I have lots of stories of those, I get, oh, my puppies had my hat, and they often tear out the inner bands. So replacing lots of those. So that's quite common.
You said in the story that you feel like it's a real honour to be entrusted with that work.
Yeah, 100%. So people come to me with their story. It's often been passed on to them before the person maybe has passed, or it might be just their parents' hat, and you can't replace that. And there's so many memories around that hat that it's a real honour that they trust me to take care of it and take the time to bring it back to life so that they can wear it.
So tell me about the relationship with Akubra.
The relationship with Akubra came about when the idea of repairing hats came up. I put out a call on Facebook asking for 6 people that might like to have their Akubra hat cleaned or serviced free of charge, and all I would ask for in return would be some feedback on the service. And I had a lot of people contact me wanting to get their hat done. So I was very glad I said only 6 to begin with, because it was overwhelming how many people needed their hats fixed. And I collected those people's stories because they were really open to sharing the stories, photographed the hats before and after, had the stories from the wearers, And I put that all together. I sent that off to Akubra asking if they would need help with repairs. And that's where the collaboration started. And so since then there is someone that works at Akubra. Her name's Cheryl. And she is my go-to for when I have an old vintage hat that I can't find a photo of and I need a replacement band. She'll say, "Oh, that's a drover. Let me check for you. I'll get back to you in a couple of days." We have a bit of to and fro with sending the width of the brim and the height of the crown and, oh, what colour does it look like? And so she's been a huge help to me and they've been very, very supportive.
So it's all about really keeping it true to its original design.
So that was the conversation we had at the beginning, was that the right band needs to go on the right hat. So I always question, if I'm unsure, what band goes on to this hat and that particular style. And yeah, so it's through that communication that I feel like I'm part of the Akubra story.
We say in our story that demand for Akubra restoration is growing, and I think we've already established that Akubra doesn't offer its own repair service, so it is using professionals like you. And they say that there are very few milliners able to complete repairs, such as some of the things you've mentioned, inner and outer band replacement, trimming the brim width. I mean, the whole Akubra story is quite incredible, isn't it? So to create a single hat takes 6 weeks and is a 162-step process from start to finish. At the Kempsey manufacturing location in New South Wales, there are 120 employees and each hat passes through 60 pairs of hands before completion. And I probably should say, in the interest of full disclosure, that R.M.Williams, the company that owns Outback Magazine, which I work for, is now under the same umbrella. So we're essentially the same company, Akubra. Akubra very much keeps its own brand, and as does R.M.Williams, but we're all under sort of the Forest family umbrella now. Have you been to the factory at Kempsey?
No, but that's something I really want to do. It's on my list over the next year or so, was to ask the question, can I come and visit? Because I would love to. Obviously, I went into some factories in Europe in my time. I got to see in France, but to see a factory in my country would be amazing.
Oh, I'm sure you'll get there.
Yeah.
So tell me about your own hats. I am a person who says I cannot wear hats. I just look bad in hats. Tell me about your own hats and what advice you would give to someone like me who obviously doesn't know how to wear one.
So that's a tricky question, Terry. So I think for you, looking at you, I would recommend that you had something asymmetrical in the brim, so not too straight. I would go with something that's a little bit softer. So if you were looking at a softer sort of felt, nothing too stiff.
Okay. Soft, asymmetrical. A bit like me, really.
Yeah, yeah. And not too broad a brim. That would be my recommendation.
So when you're recommending things to people, you're looking at head size, face shape, and again, also, I guess it has to be fit for purpose, doesn't it? So are you going to be out there on the land, or are you going to be wearing it to the Melbourne Cup, or whatever you are doing?
100%. Also, things that you might not take into consideration, people, if they're going to be wearing a scarf. If you like to wear big chunky scarves, then you don't want to be having a big brim at the back. If you're a glasses wearer, you might be considering where your hat sits on your head.
If it's for sun protection or decoration.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you can have hats for sun protection that are also decorative. We need to be wearing more hats, I think.
Yeah, well, it can only be good. What's your go-to hat?
So I have it's a grey, like a very dark grey anthracite felt hat that I wear, and it's got a tan ribbon work on it. And I find that that's just really easy to throw on. I throw on that with jeans and a shirt. Looks good with a dress and boots too. I do love black hats, but I tend to go a dark grey over wearing a black.
And do you have favourite Akubras?
My favourites would be the Dallas, which has got a sort of a flat crown and it's got sort of a western brim, so it goes up, and they were done in really nice colours. Sort of there's a really beautiful bluish grey, and it has a band that has a chain detail. They're not available anymore, but this is a vintage one that I've repaired quite a few of. And I guess if I was going to get one, I'd probably get a Riverina. I really like the plaited band on that.
What do you see most of?
I clean a lot of cream hats.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. And they're usually the ones that, yeah, they look like they need a clean. So a lot of cattlemen. I think that's probably one of their most popular styles. I'm just presuming a lot of those are just reblocking, and people seem to have worn them for many years and loved them. And the Rough Rider, that's the other popular one.
Is it true that you were working on a hat that doubled as a dog bowl for a farmer's four-legged mustering team?
Yes, this
Okay.
is true. This is a funny story. The hat came to me in a box and it was wet. And I pulled it out and I thought, what is going on here? I inspected the box. The box wasn't wet, but the hat was. So I hung it out to dry. And then I did send the question of,
Why is it wet?
can I inquire as to why is your
Yes.
hat wet? And I got the message saying that his dog Ernie would be very grateful to have his bowl back. And so he goes down to the dam, fills it up for water for the dog. Yeah.
And then puts it on his head. Yuck. Obviously a very close partnership.
Partnership there, yeah, definitely. Not for everyone.
No. So you came back to Australia how many years ago now?
So I came back just, it's around 7 years ago. So I came back, I was pregnant with my first child.
And part of the thinking was, wanted to raise your children at home in the Australian country?
Yeah, I had this burning desire to be at home once I felt pregnant. Became clear I wanted to be close to family, grandparents, and yeah, that's really important to me.
So you've got 2 children now?
Yeah, so I've got 2 little boys.
And you've got sort of somewhat a flexible working arrangement, I'd imagine, moulding it around your lifestyle and your family and your other commitments. And it sounds like, I imagine, the sort of job that you do could be done that way fairly well.
And that's on purpose.
I'm wondering if you're passing on your love of hats to the next generation.
I'm definitely passing on the passion of designing and creating. My 6-year-old this morning was up at 6 a.m. sitting at his desk drawing costume designs for something we're going to make in the school holidays.
Wow.
He wants to be a dragon, so we're going to make him a costume. They do both have hats and they wear them. They both have felt hats that they've chosen there. It's like a beautiful rabbit for a felt hat. And they've chosen their own band, and we've made the feathers to go in them. So they do wear hats all the time. And I think the younger generation are wearing hats all the time at daycare and school. And
yeah, for sun protection. Can't go wrong with that. So I guess to finish up, it seems to me the whole millinery career that you've had has just been really an expression of your creativity, your love of craft. And I'm just wondering where you see your creative journey going in the future.
That's a really good question.
Or where would you like it to go?
Where would I like to go? So I have a few things planned this year. I've got a few more things booked in for speaking and sharing my story. I had the chance to speak at the Royal Women's event last year at Nagambie, and that really ignited something in me about sharing my story and connecting with others. And I definitely want to continue repairing. I feel a real purpose to that, and collecting those stories. I think that is something I want to do along the way, is to journal those stories and preserve them, the stories behind the hats. And I would love to one day do some design work with Akubra. That would always be a dream of mine.
We could call it the Becky.
Yeah, the Becky. That would be great. But I do just want to find ways to keep working within the millinery world, and just keep making, keep learning. That's another thing that's really important to me, is to be learning along the way.
You talked about wanting to share your story. Well, that's what you're doing right now through this podcast. So I hope that is a help as well. I just want to remind listeners that you can read more about Becky-Jane Fortin and her work and see some lovely pictures of her and what she does in issue 162 of Outback Magazine, which of course you can get at all good newsagents or from us at outbackmag.com.au. I'm trying to come up with some hat pun now. I doff my hat to you, or hats off to you, or what? You'd get a few hat puns coming your way, wouldn't you?
The one that we use is hat's what I'm talking about.
Okay, that's not at all corny, but I do like it. All right, well, thank you so much for talking to me today. All the best with the creative journey. Take care.
Thanks, Sherry. Bye.